Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Brian Sanders with me. Brian is a host of one of the top five podcasts called Peak Human. He's created I would say not a diet, but a way of eating lifestyle called Sapien. And then he has a documentary that he's working on or has worked on called Food Lies. And that's really just bringing knowledge to kind of the everyday person about what is right in between all the things you hear in the media and all the things you read in the headlines, what's applicable. So, Brian, thanks so much for being on today.
Oh yeah, thanks, Phil. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So to highlight and start your story, you're originally from Hawaii. So talk a little bit about, growing up there and obviously it's part of the US in regards to rules and regulation, but it's a little bit different. Anyone that's ever visited there, it has its own kind of way of life there.
It was amazing. I guess people could guess. No one's complaining about growing up in Hawaii. I grew up barefoot actually, so yeah, a little bit different. I didn't wear shoes. I didn't wear anything on my feet until seventh grade when they forced me to wear like little flip flops. Like the sandals, we call them slippers in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And so I wore the rubber slippers, which I still wear actually. I roam around Austin in my little cheap Hawaii rubber slippers. But yeah, it's amazing. Grew up on the beach, hiking, doing all the things, and small community though.
Yeah.
You got to leave, I think. So a lot of my friends, I went to a great high school, great private school my mom taught at,
Okay.
and all my friends went to the top colleges in the country, and we just left, and then many people came back, and I didn't, and I just come back for Christmas to hang out with everyone.
Yeah. So when you left, you also went to a very great school, UCLA. And, as I highlight different things that you're now into in regards to, fitness, diets, things of that nature, one might think, oh, well, he probably was, exercise science or he was in the sciences. But you were in a little bit of a different career path originally. So talk a little bit about how you picked going to school and your major and then getting started in that industry right after.
Yeah, I was just always good at math and science. My mom was a math teacher, right? I was in her
Yeah.
class. And so the natural thing was to go into engineering. I barely
Yeah.
even knew what it was. I'm like, oh, it sounds cool. You build stuff. All right, whatever. So yeah, I got my mechanical engineering degree from UCLA. I quickly didn't really like it, but I just got the degree and I started working at actually companies that built stuff for Disney and Universal.
Mm.
So super fun. It's kind of my
Yeah.
dream is to work on all these amusement parks, and we built the rides, and I got to design all this stuff. It was so fun. Like all the stuff around the rides, really the fun stuff, not like the ride track. The ride track, it's kind of boring. It's like, okay, we'll just engineer some steel. But I got to figure out how we're building everything around Toy Story ride, in Universal Studios, the Harry Potter ride. I had my
Yeah.
own ride actually in Singapore. It was Universal Studios in Sentosa, and eventually I got to just work on my own ride. It was amazing. So
That's
yeah,
really cool. So, how did you get started into that, or was there a connection with a UCLA alum or anything, or how did you end up finding yourself in that world?
just happened. It just happened. It's one of those things in life. I just yeah, I just applied to some jobs, and it just was a dream, and it just worked out.
So, what is the beginning stages of designing a ride? I mean, is it project manager kind of giving you, hey, here's the theme, and then you create different
Mm.
inclines and declines
Mhm.
and turns and things of that nature? Or what's the beginning phases of that?
So there's two different versions. One is Disney, they have their Imagineers, and they're very like they do a lot of work to just know exactly what they want, but they'll give you just a 2D drawing, right? So they
Yeah.
give you like a storyboards of exactly what the ride looks like, but it's 2D.
Yeah.
And so this is the process with them. Is the fun part is now we're like, okay, how are we going to make this? Let's
Yeah.
make this into 3D. And then we have to actually figure out the materials, how to build it. So going from just illustrations to real life, and we did the whole process. Super fun. Then with the Singapore, actually this new ride, we did it from scratch, and so we actually had a producer, some
Wow.
Hollywood like sort of producer guy that was a storyteller and was used to, he's like, how are we going to tell this story? And I got to be in on meetings of like, well, what's going to happen? It's like it was crazy. And then I actually got to design some of the design elements of it, even like, oh, this sign crashes to the roof, and so I got to design like what that sign looked like. And did, research and made a story, or those poster boards of like a mood board, and like this is what it should look like, and they approved it, and then I got to actually build it in 3D, and then we, built it in the shop, and then they shipped it over
How
there.
amazing. How amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, as you're working in this industry, clearly it sounds like you're enjoying it. Both of your parents end up having some health conditions pop up, and that leads you to, at 30 years old, at that point, having lost both parents, and it just starts you wondering. So, talk a little bit about, what was going on parents health wise, and then, what ended up being the catalyst for you to get very interested in foods and diets.
Yeah, that was a big change in my life. That was that big turning moment right there. Is 30. My parents thought they were doing the right thing. We grew up eating whole food, or we made meals from scratch,
Yeah.
right? It's not like we were just sitting at McDonald's all day. It was a huge treat to go to McDonald's. I remember loving, like, oh my God, we get to go to McDonald's. This is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. So we were doing the right thing, making our own food, not eating candy and soda and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We followed the food pyramid. Basically, they're like, okay, get your 7 to 11 servings of grains. We were doing the whole wheat pasta and lean chicken and broccoli, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work like long term. Like it's good in theory. Like, I kind of get it in theory. It's like, oh, we should all eat, more whole grains. Like these ideas don't seem so bad. But then what I found is long term, people just kind of gain a pound a year.
Mm.
And that's kind of the average thing that happens, right? You just see people just slowly gaining the weight, and they get the conditions, and then they get the medications. And then next thing you know, you have these chronic diseases. So, right, they had Alzheimer's and cancer, and these are two of the, deadliest chronic diseases other than heart disease and type 2 diabetes. They're all really kind of the same thing, really. It's metabolic dysfunction, or some of it's immunological dysfunction too, and they're related, right? So if you just keep living the modern diet and lifestyle, you just gain these conditions and problems
Mm.
over the years, and you don't know it. So that's what happened to them. No one
Yeah.
told them, like, hey, you're not metabolically healthy. The CDC says 8 out of 10 people who have prediabetes don't know it.
Mm.
Right? This is crazy. This is their
Yeah.
whole job, is to try to help people not get chronic diseases. And they admit, you can go to their website. It says 8 out of 10 people with prediabetes don't know it. So they didn't know it. So now looking back, they realized they had prediabetes. So, and the same thing was happening with me. I was 30 and I was getting the dad bod. I had all the different little conditions popping up. I'm like, oh, this is just how life goes.
Mm.
You get acid reflux, and I had like overuse injuries and allergies and this and that. And then I realized this is not at all how humans need to live. And I
Yeah.
just made some simple changes to my diet, and all my problems went away. I lost like 25 pounds of fat. I didn't even know. I was not like obese or anything. I was just like a normal 30-year-old. And then my body just completely changed. I was like, oh, wait, this is how humans are supposed to live. So that was all spurred, really, just, obviously we wake up, you lose your parents, you wake up. And I just have been on this journey ever since, trying to, yeah, figure it out. Like, what do people eat? Like, how do people change?
Yeah. Now, something that you've said, and I think almost everyone would relate to, is, on your journey to learn as much as you can, you've interviewed, I mean, probably hundreds, if not thousands of different, experts, right? People that are, either have the school title or have a certain amount of time in the field. And I think one of the confusing things to the average person, or, someone like myself who's not an expert, is I can read this article today and it says it cures cancer, and tomorrow it can cause cancer. And I can read this that says this is the best diet. And then the next day
Mhm.
I can read an article that says, no, this is the better diet. And I think there's so much information that a person almost gets confused on, well, what's either right or what's applicable to me. So, as either you were going through your journey, or as somebody that's listening to this and they're like, well, I'm kind of interested in,
Mhm.
learning what I should be doing. What's your, suggestion or recommendation on how to sort through all of the information that's there?
It's not easy. That's why it's been a 10-year journey for me. I'm
Yeah.
40 now. Yeah, in way better health than I was at 30. So
Yeah.
hopefully, I'm just one person, but maybe you can trust me, because I have interviewed hundreds and hundreds of doctors and scientists about this. And I think I have learned a fair amount about how to pick through the noise, pick
Mm.
through the, yes, it's very opposite. And one thing you can do is just understand food better. And well, this is what we're trying to do in the film. This
Yeah.
It's actually a series, 6-part series. So luckily, we're just going to put it all together, and it's been a 6-year project making this, and
Yeah.
it's going to be way better explained than I'm going to do now to make sense. You're going to have visuals, and it's going to finally break it down. But you just need to understand food on a deeper level. Right now, everyone just thinks of food or diet as just some name or something. They're like, oh, well, I did paleo once, or I heard about vegan, or I did the low. Like, these are just names of diets. That's not learning about food and how
Right.
food works, right? And about nutrition. So I'll think of the simplest way to just do it for a layman or just anyone listening is food is 4 things. It's okay. It's protein, vitamins, minerals. Well, it's protein, nutrients, fats, and carbs.
Mm.
Okay, basically,
Yep.
right? The nutrients are the vitamins and minerals.
Yeah.
You need to just get more of the nutrient side, the protein and nutrient side, and less of the energy side, which is the fat and the carb side. So you can argue, oh, low fat's better than low carb, right? This whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Both of them are kind of right. It's
Mm.
like these are kind of energy sources that people are getting too much of, right?
Yeah.
Energy is a good thing, I get right, to get enough of it to get through the day. But in modern world, we have way too much energy from fat or carbs, especially refined, right?
Yeah.
Fat, carbs, and not enough nutrients. So people
Mm.
are lacking in protein, vitamin, minerals, right? They're lacking in that, and they have too much energy. This is kind of the highest level view, but
Yeah.
this is what's going on. So it's like any diet that's good will help you get more of the nutrients and the correct amount of energy, which probably means less energy,
Yeah. Now,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Now, as I hear you say that, I think once again, depending on what you're trying to do, right, you probably need to either dive into it much more detailed or you can stay at a higher level. But, I know you talked about it earlier. Hey, even in my household, we were eating the right things, right? The right things. We were,
Mhm.
cooking our own meals. We weren't going to McDonald's. In reflection, it sounds like you still feel like, man, we maybe didn't even have the right, you know, practice there. So, are there certain foods that I guess maybe we hear or we think in our head, hey, these are good ones? To your point, maybe it's like a whole grain pasta, right? And people are like, oh, well, it's healthy to eat that, 3, 4 days a week. That they just, without having the knowledge, are maybe being detrimental to themselves. And then are there certain foods that, you'd say, hey, people should probably be enjoying this or having this a bit more frequently than maybe what they are today? I know you've talked about red meats before and maybe some
Mhm.
of the difference of opinion there.
Yes, yes. Okay, you're right. One level deeper from that. So they're like, what foods have a lot of nutrients
Yeah.
and don't have extra energy from fats or carbs? Well, it's actually animal foods.
Mm.
Most animal foods are way more nutrient dense. So this is going against the narrative, right? You hear
Yeah.
the classic thing, and the narrative too is that you need 7 to 11 servings of whole grains and starches and all this stuff. This is not a good paradigm. This is the old paradigm that got us here. This is what we've been doing since the 80s or even
Yeah.
earlier, really. And
Yeah.
look where it's got us. So I don't think grains are great for humans in general. I actually we're doing this in the episode 2 in the film, talking about the agricultural revolution, and we actually got shorter, we have more disease, we got smaller brains. All
Mm.
this happened 12,000 years ago when we started relying on grains. It's
Mhm.
actually in the archaeological record. You can see a difference between the pre-agricultural human and the post-agricultural human, and it's
Wow.
way worse since grains because it's just a lower quality nutrition,
Mm.
right? They're not like necessarily bad. I mean, they have gluten, and some people have problems with gluten. And well, actually, I do think they're they're a little bad. Maybe they're a little
Yeah.
bad on the gut, but
Yeah.
they're not. It's just not a good source of nutrition. Two, if you're just eating potatoes all day, that's not a great nutrition. If you're just eating white rice, these things it's just not. It's like sort of empty calories. So if
Yeah.
you got to think about food, meat has been demonized, but it's actually the best source of nutrition. It has all the vitamins and minerals and protein in the form humans need it.
Mm.
And so it's just the message is so backwards, right? They're telling you to limit red meat, limit animal fat. They're telling you to eat a whole bunch of grains and eat a whole bunch of canola oil. They're like, oh, eat animal fat. You should use the heart healthy oils. This is a huge nightmare. These highly refined oils are probably one of the biggest problems in our food system. It's like all these processed foods and fried foods are made with these new industrial oils, seed oils. It's all the different stuff starting around 1913, 1914, 15. We started developing all these oils, Crisco margarine too, when we were using the trans fat. These are all terrible. We did not have these throughout human history. So I know I tend to get really into this stuff in detail,
Yeah,
and I'm
I
so
love it.
obsessed with this nutrition stuff. But the highest level thing, I'll just zoom out for it. Just real quick recap too. Don't eat the refined oils, the refined carbs, refined sugars, right? These are bad. These are very new in our diet.
Yeah.
And be fine with animal foods. We've always eaten these foods, eggs, red meat, any kind of meat, organs, even. This is the stuff we ate for all of history. It's so simple. You got to switch your diet, right? This is because I was
Yeah.
doing the opposite. When I was 30, not doing well, I was avoiding red meat, avoiding animal fat, eating all the whole grains, using the low fat dressings. And it's just a slow death, I'm telling you.
So as you say that, there's a couple things that my mind goes to, and one of them is, you think of kind of maybe the business evolution there, right? Like, well, why did we need Crisco? Why do we need these oils to be created? And there's probably an element of, well, at the time, maybe your refrigerator wasn't very reliable, right? So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, if I could put certain oils on it, it might preserve the product, or salt, right? Like, hey, maybe I use that to preserve a product instead of it having a lower shelf life. And there's obviously a very strong business aspect to that, right? If a grocery store, not to name any of them, can keep a product on their shelves for a week instead of 2 days, right? There's money to be made. Whereas if it could only be for 2 days,
Mm-hmm.
then there could be a lot of spoilage and cost involved with that. So as you've kind of done your research, is there any overlap that you started to notice there between maybe how we're presented information there versus maybe any business aspects that could be underlying?
Yeah, this is kind of the biggest story, actually. You always have to go to the root because in the beginning, and people listening might be do this. You're like, well, how did we get everything so wrong? Right? Why
Yeah.
is the government, all these USDA government agencies, World Health Organization around the world, they're telling me to avoid red meat and to get my whole grains and low fat and all this stuff. How could they all be wrong? And you've hit on the answer. It's because it's big business. There's
Yeah.
money to be made, and there could have been some accidents along the way that led him there, or there could have been some purposeful things that happened. But this is actually the story behind why we got things so wrong. Why is everything backwards? And you're very correct with shelf life processing. If animal fat, animal protein and fat, it's the most expensive and it's also the most unstable. It needs to be refrigerated. And so yes, they figured after World War II, especially, they were processing foods. They had great innovation. They're like, oh man, we can send the soldiers rations and they won't spoil, and we can can things and make all these shelf stable products. And then they thought it was kind of the wave of the future. That's what I'm saying. Some of it could have just been like by accident. We're like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
And they kind of just thought all calories were the same back then. A lot of people still think all calories are the same, which is insane. But they're just like, oh, a calorie is a calorie. All right, so we'll just make some processed food, put it in a bag, put it in a box. It's all good. It's just calories. All you got to do is burn them. You know,
Yeah.
and that's a huge story too, right?
Yeah.
It's not true. It is absolutely not true. And that's if it was just as easy as that, then everyone would be in shape, right? Because no one wants. It's not like people want disease and obesity. It's
Yeah.
just it's like this slow poison. It's slow death, is like I was saying. So big industry took over. They took over this messaging, low fat paradigm. Then that opened the door to the processed food industry, adding in refined carbs, refined grains, refined sugars, and yeah, it's this huge momentum now. You can't really turn the ship around.
Yeah. So, and I think that's, an interesting point, right? Is something that could have been intended for a good season of time, right? Like, hey, to get through the war, we might need to do this. But for
Mm.
somebody to eat this every single day for 80 years of their life,
Mm.
that might be a problem, right? To do this for 2 years while we're at war, whatever the time frame is, a short time, hey, that's not necessarily going to instantly cause this problem for people. It's going to help us be able to get them food, and having some food, even if that's at a little bit of a detriment to oil health, is probably better than not having rations at all. But if a person eats this day in and day out for 80 years, then you might see some of these health side effects you've alluded to.
That's exactly it. And it's kind of these unintended consequences. And people didn't know. I mean, I'll give them a little bit of credit, is sometimes you just don't know. Right. And then you have to do the studies or you see what the problem is, people aren't turning it around.
Yeah.
And we should know by now. But I'm telling you, there's too much money being made. The top four industries in the US, there's $4 trillion industries. The top four, look it up. They're all in the healthcare. Well, I call it sick care. They're all in the sick care industry,
Yeah.
right? This is all just it's all part of this system. So why are what are they all going to suddenly change the model to like prevention, right? It's just it's all about pills and procedures and take this Ozempic, take this drug, if you're feeling bad. I had the acid reflux. No one told me to change my diet. They're just like,
Mm,
oh, take this medication and then the reflux will go away. I haven't had acid reflux in 10 years since
mm,
I changed my diet. Like it's insane that no one is focusing on this, but I know why.
yeah.
It's the money. Yeah.
Big industry. So that leads me to, tying into something you mentioned earlier and bringing both these points together. One of the things you had mentioned was, hey, eating an animal diet. And today we have levels of protein sources, right? You have free range, or, or organic, if you will. And then you have, large institutions that are essentially manufacturing things just to be slaughtered. And, they talk about, hey, maybe they're injecting certain steroids or nutrients to help them grow quicker or bigger. So there's, once again, more profitability there. So breaking that down, I mean, is that okay to eat, chicken from the big companies? Is it okay to eat meat where you maybe don't know where it comes from,
Mhm.
and it's better to eat other ones? But, or is it, hey, what you think you're getting out of these certain protein sources may not even be a good decision. You really need to be looking into more organic or grass-fed,
Mm.
things of that nature.
It's a good question. It's very nuanced. It's a very good
Yeah,
question because a lot of people want to know this.
yeah,
And well, I have a grass-fed regenerative meat company called Nose
yes,
to Tail. So
yes,
I'm a bit biased, but I'll give you the straight answer because
yeah,
I mean, I don't make much money on it anyway. It's not a good business. It'd be a great business if I just sold processed foods. Then
yeah.
there's a huge profit margin. I'd make a lot of money.
Right.
I'm selling the highest end meat you could get, like very well raised, right? We're doing the regenerative practices. They're moving around. They're all organic, like the whole thing.
Yeah,
No money, no money to be made. That's why we'll never have any power, right? It's not
yeah,
like these ranchers have power. So so the story is pigs and chickens are raised the worst. These are in these warehouses. 99% of chickens and pigs out there is raised poorly.
yeah,
But some people they got to get that protein. They need something to like. What are you going to eat, right? You need something to eat,
right,
and the alternative is worse, right? So it's like,
right,
what you need to fill your belly. Okay, well, what are you going to eat? Like a box of pasta, a box of mac and cheese. This stuff is also industrially produced,
right.
monocrops covered in glyphosate. They're doing herbicides, pesticides. They're killing animals left and right to grow these crops. I mean, it's a nightmare. All food production comes at a cost, and all food production has its downsides. And so, really, I think you got to just get what you can what you can afford. That's the number one thing. So if you are on food stamps and you're barely affording it, well, you got to get that chicken from the grocery store and get some ground beef and some cheap eggs, and
Yeah,
you're good. If you I would say people who make a little more money, invest your money into your food. That
mm,
is a great investment in your health and your long-term health. And it's what I do, right? I don't
yeah,
make much money, I'm telling you, but I get the good eggs. I go to the farmer's market. I get the best eggs, deep orange yolks. I'm happy to pay these farmers. They're doing a good job. The chickens are on pasture, right?
yeah,
Way more nutrients in eggs. They're eating little bugs. They're getting their species appropriate diet. So they have healthy eggs. Now I'm getting my species appropriate diet, which is more animal based. Throughout history, humans ate animal foods as much as we could get,
yeah.
right? And plants were more like survival foods. Not that they were, they're fine. It's just we got the bulk of our nutrition from animal food. So if you can do that, do that. You're going to be better off.
Yeah. Well, and I think something that, it's an interesting uh, thought process, and you can't necessarily make it super simple as a comparison, but I think something I'm hearing you say, and once again, there's no guarantees of this, but it is if you spend a little bit of more money on the front end buying higher quality foods, you might save yourself a lot of money or maybe health conditions on the back end that could arise from not spending the money in the beginning spot on getting the healthier foods.
There's a great quote that someone made: pay your farmer now or pay pharma later. Right? It's
Yeah, yeah,
very true. It's
yeah,
very true. And there's actually, you have more leeway with animal foods because I know plenty of people. So I've been in this game for 10 years, right? Full time, 6 years, talked to hundreds of doctors, scientists, talk to these doctors. They work with patients day in and day out.
yeah,
Not everyone is eating like the high end regenerative meat from nose to tail. And they're having amazing results though.
yeah,
I'm telling you, this is not a good message that people want to hear, especially someone like me coming who has a regenerative meat company. But these people are going to the grocery store, getting some ground beef and getting some eggs and completely reversing their diabetes, right?
yeah.
Losing hundreds of pounds. I know a woman personally, 280 pounds in 1 year, lost half her body weight, 140 pounds. She just at the grocery store.
Wow.
She just bought whatever, she just completely changed her life by just buying more red meat and eggs instead
Yeah.
of everything else.
I love it. Now, one of the things that I know really spawned your idea for creating the documentary was you had watched the documentary "What the Health," and there were just certain things that maybe didn't sit right with you, or based on your research, you're like, I don't know if that's true, and you figured, I could write a bunch of different things, but probably the best way or the most direct way to have an impact is to create a documentary. So, talk a little bit about, what the maybe mission was for you, because once again there are many documentaries out there, but there was a specific mission that you were wanting to attack there.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of these vegan films over the years, and they're just coming at it from an animal rights perspective, and that's their perspective. And I actually think that more animals die producing plant foods
Mm,
than animal foods, and they have studies about that, and you can see that in the literature. But uh, I that really did set me down the path because that's what's out there. That's a message that's been out there. Netflix keeps producing these animal rights activist films that are disguised as nutrition films, and it's really harmful, I think. There's a new one right now called You Are What You Eat on Netflix, and it's this vegan thing, or like a two you see this one, the twins study. They had like
yeah,
twins,
yeah,
and I mean, I looked at the study immediately. It's completely wrong. Like they have the group, the vegan group had way fewer calories. So of course they did a little better, and their LDL went down, which is not even a good marker of heart disease. Like that's a whole nother story for a cardiologist to explain. But it's it's just they find ways to skew the data or cherry pick, and then they just have a message, and they clearly just the whole time you're watching the show, they're just interviewing vegan activists and animal rights activists and telling you propaganda. So we're trying to just get the true story out there, right? And
yeah,
it's not, and like we actually completely changed. Like it's been 6 years making this film. We
yeah.
threw it all away 3 years ago. All the
Mm,
footage and the script, we threw it all out and redid it and reshot it. And
wow.
I learned more, right? It's like I was a little bit in this one camp, and I thought I knew it all. And then I learned more, and you have to be in camp, no camp. That's
Yeah,
that's where I'm at now, where if someone's like, hey, this is actually the way it is, and then I could change my opinion any day, right?
yeah,
If the science shows me this. So that's, yeah, we need to have a film out there that's just telling people the just a simple truth, and not going too far down of like, this is how you should do it, or this is like the one diet, because there's not one.
yeah. Well, and someone listening is like, I may not go down the rabbit hole, Phil, of wanting to research all the food stuff, but I think a point you made is a good one just in life, and that is, don't discredit someone else's opinion the second they say it if it's against your opinion. Maybe entertain it and try and understand where they came from or what's the rationale behind it. And then once you can do a little research, right, then you can formulate whether that's true or not. I think so frequently we've heard something before and we don't really have a basis other than we heard it from someone we trust or we
Mhm.
respect. And that has become our, line in the sand. And so we just project that out. And then anytime we hear something contradictory to that, we, say, oh, well, that can't be right because it's not what I heard the one time. So I guess, even on that side for you, I think that's incredible that you had the mindset of, well, you know what? I did have maybe this certain
Mhm.
opinion or bias, and now I've learned something new, and I'm open to sharing that.
That is the number one thing I've learned in this journey. And
Yeah,
I do talk about that a lot of like being wrong, being open to other ideas. You got to learn other people's ideas so then you can see if you can debunk them or not.
yeah,
You know, like I had to learn all of these vegan ideas or like talk to vegetarians. And I'm very, very kind and approachable with these people. Like I love talking to vegetarians and anyone and be
yeah,
like, tell me about it. You know, why does it work for you? Or does it not work for you? Or like what is your cholesterol? Or like, is that even good to
yeah.
have this extremely low LDL when well your triglycerides are really high? You know, and they're
Mm,
like, oh, what? I'm like, yeah, you don't want super high triglycerides. This is like undisputed. And your vegetarian diet, you're eating a ton of processed carbs, or you know, your HDL is not great, your triglycerides are high. Like, you need to change. So yeah, it helped me get better at what is it called? Steel manning my own opinion, right? The steel man
mhm.
argument is if you can describe the other person's argument, right? And I know their other argument and then still have your opinion or argument win.
Yeah, I love that. Now, to your point, and kind of talking through that, I think one of the pieces that you shared that was very intriguing to me that just opened my mind of something I'd never thought of was why do I need to eat fruit every day if at some point, and once again, I live in Nebraska, so there were points before modern technology where you could only eat fruit for certain months out of the year, right? Because they probably didn't have the ability to ship fruits from certain spots and it certainly wasn't going to be growing in the winter. And so, yeah, your body probably doesn't have that as a necessity every single day, right? Because if it did, maybe like water, for example, well, then I there would be a whole bunch of deaths in the winter time frame, historically, because we wouldn't have had fruit. So, talk a little bit about that because I think that's a very interesting point of, hey, historically, you would eat it in a season, but it may not be something that was consistently eaten by the human.
Yeah, I like to take an ancestral viewpoint on a lot of things because you want to check. It doesn't mean it's correct if our ancestors did it, but you
Yeah.
check it with modern science, right? So then, if you can check things on both sides and they check out, then you're like, ah, I think I'm onto something,
Yeah.
right? So some of that is exactly what you're talking about, eating seasonally. Like, it is just an undisputed fact that for most of human history, we didn't have cargo ships and airplanes
Right.
and we couldn't ship it in. I'm just telling you, we know this, right? So
Yeah.
it's you
Yeah.
had to have what was around you. We know this for sure. We don't exactly know what our diet was, but at least we know we weren't shipping in like pineapples from down south to
Right.
up, right? So you always check that. But you know, maybe we did have potatoes, right? So maybe we could have some potatoes and store them. So I'm not saying you have to go like low carb during the winter, but you should be more mindful of seasonality. And you know, look at our ancestors. We went through ice ages. We went through long periods. Like our ancestors traveled up north into Europe, and you know, it was freezing most of the year for a lot of history. So it's like these people were eating animals. They were eating giant woolly mammoths. They were eating fat and meat. And so I'm not saying that everyone has to do that. A lot of people do heal and lose weight on just eating fatty meat only, right? That's the
Yeah.
whole thing, the carnivore crowd. But at least you can say that it's not bad for us. You know what I mean? At
Yeah.
least you can like kind of think about, okay, well, I don't trust these new like government guidelines telling me to avoid red meat when there's people who ate it for their whole life and were perfectly healthy, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, these thoughts made me shake up my opinion on fruits and vegetables too. So I don't have any problem with fruits and vegetables, but I just second guess the necessity of them
Yeah.
or right like there's this message you have to have them. And it's just interesting. It's like maybe you don't always have to have them. It's like we didn't always have them.
Yeah. Yeah, and something I went to, and I'm gonna ask just because I know none the
Mhm.
difference. But that is, part of me when I first originally heard you say that, I was like, wow, that's super intriguing. And then the second thing my mind went to is, but is it possible that the body is healthier with having that year round? And it was like sustainable in the time frame where you couldn't have it year round, but maybe it's better for the body to have it more frequently. I don't know if you've had any
Mm.
research or data on that, but that was just kind of a thought that came to mind.
Yeah. No, I think about this all the time. No, this is
Yeah.
all I think about. I love challenging my beliefs too. I was like, but would it be better? Or
Yeah.
that, so there's a lot of ways to think about it. So then you can look at the actual like nutrition facts of plant foods. And so part of the story is just with the straight up nutrition,
Yeah.
animal foods have more bioavailable and complete protein, vitamins, and minerals in the forms human can eat, right? It's like we're not made of lettuce, right? So like we can eat some lettuce and our body has to go through all these complex processes to get it into the form that we need, or we can just eat some meat and we're made of meat and it's easier to
Mm.
get it. And this is, it sounds, I mean, there actually is science to it. It's not, this is actually bioavailability. We study this and we know that animal foods have higher bioavailability. And it's so, uh, plant foods, there's nothing wrong with them, but there's actually, it's just, there's not like anything that special
Mm.
in them. People talk about fiber a lot. Fiber actually isn't a necessity. People have been eating zero fiber diets for decades and not having problems. So it I think the main thing is that we think that the plant foods are so healthy or we think fiber is so necessary because if you look at the epidemiology, if you look at like broad populations, people
Yeah.
who eat more plants like tend to be healthier. But really what this is means that they are healthier people that are eating less processed foods,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
like, I mean, yes, there are some like polyphenols and there, I get it. They're in plants. There's more vitamin C, there's more magnesium in certain things, there's more folate in certain, leafy greens. I'm not saying these plants are worthless, but you don't need tons and tons of it. You don't and you don't need fiber necessarily. And it's just you don't want processed foods is the number one thing.
Yeah. Now to that point, and just out of curiosity,
Mhm.
something that has certainly become more and more popular is taking vitamins, it's taking protein powders, right? It's taking collagen, right? I mean, just different things that you can throw in a cup of water, drink it, and get a higher amount. Are those things good? Are they bad? Are they, hey, it should never replace, like the physical food. It's more about, um, you know, if you want
Mm.
to supplement a little bit with a protein shake, that's fine. Or is that like a no, because obviously that's not coming from an animal source? Where does this all fall in?
Oh man, I like your question because this is a nuanced thing again.
Yeah.
It's so nuanced. In an ideal world, you could get all of your nutrients from your diet. An ideal world, people just even 50 years ago, 100 years ago, people were eating liver, people were eating the whole animal, right? My
Yeah.
grandpa, I remember he would eat liver and onions once a week, right?
Right. Yeah.
And like there's so many nutrients in liver that we're not getting in our normal diet. No
Yeah.
one does that anymore, right? So
Yep.
now, yeah, I guess you should take vitamins because you're not getting all of these things that are in liver.
Yep.
So if you're some people are really into it and they love to eat nose to tail, they love to, get really into this stuff. They're eating I love oysters too. Tons of nutrition in oysters that people aren't getting. But like if you're not going to eat oysters, you can get smoked oysters actually in a can. You could get smoked oysters in olive oil
Mm.
and you know, you could get those anywhere and they can sit on a shelf. But if you're not going to do that, then maybe you do need some zinc supplements, or maybe you're not getting enough copper, or maybe that. So I get there are ways to do it to make your life easier, and that's fine. And
Yeah.
same thing with protein powder. I'm like, all right, if you're really having trouble getting enough protein in your diet, you're just not gonna do it, right? It's just you don't want to sit there and buy steaks every day or cook tons of ground beef. Okay, get your protein shake. But it is a supplement, right? It's
Yeah.
supplementing what you're not doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think something that I'm consistently hearing that I hope, listeners will take away is it's like there there's a good, a better, a best, right? Like it's not like don't
Mhm.
get protein, right? It's like, well, ideally you would do it from, the
Grass-fed
organic, yeah,
regenerative.
yeah,
Yeah.
grass-fed way. But if you couldn't do that, still get the protein source at the store because that's better than just doing a carb diet. And if you're not getting enough through those two, then add a protein supplement, right? And kind of once again, element of a budget, but then two, also, I guess probably personal desires and things of that nature. But it's kind of like there's the good, the better, the best way to do these things.
That's exactly it. Make it fit in your life. So actually, it's kind of a journey you can go on. It's what I did too. I didn't wake up and immediately be at the farmer's market getting the great eggs, right? That was a
Yeah.
little journey that I went on. I was like, okay, now I'm gonna get the better egg, the more expensive eggs from the store. Then I'm gonna move. You keep moving down the line. So yes, people, the number one thing you can do is cut out the processed foods, and specifically, it's this like the refined sugar, refined grains, and the industrial oils. Well, all processed foods have those in them, so you just can't. If you get rid of those, you're not gonna be able to eat processed foods. So if you go down that path, that is the number one thing you can do. And it doesn't require budget because it's basically just not eating junk, not eating snacks, not going to
Yeah.
Starbucks and getting like a $7 coffee with like 30 different ingredients and
That's
like 50 grams of sugar, right? So
yeah.
it's like then you can go down the next path, right? Then it's like, okay, let's get more protein. Let's blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Now,
Just, it's a
or go
journey.
ahead. Yeah. Well, and so one of the things you mentioned earlier that I want to make sure we talked about at some point is, there's different research that shows like caloric state and having kind of a consistent caloric intake, it can be healthy for the body or just not consistently being significantly above. And I know earlier you said people think a calorie is a calorie. And so, there are plenty of nutritionists out there that say, hey, to lose a pound, you can take in 2,500 calories a day, but you've got to be in a deficit, and that's the focal point. For the common day person, is that a good enough way to understand it? And it's like, hey, if I'm trying to be a bodybuilder or have a six pack like Brian, then I need to be more
Mhm.
into my macros and understanding, the actual calories. Or as an everyday person that's, wanting to get in shape or get into better shape, should they have a better understanding of that?
Yes, I'm obsessed with this part. Calorie, okay. It's again, it's a little bit nuanced because, of course, to lose fat, you're going to have to eat less calories at some point or burn more, right? There's two
Yes.
sides of the equation, right? So
Yep.
yes, there's definitely some energy balance going on. Obvious, right? I'm an
Yes.
engineer. I understand energy balance, but there's
Yes.
so much more to it. Okay,
Yeah.
so much more. And the simplest one is going back to my nutrients versus energy thing, right?
Yep.
Protein, vitamin, minerals, these are completely different than fat and carbs. Okay. People have debates of which is better, fat calories or carb calories, or like, oh, right. It actually doesn't really matter that much. There's some studies that show it doesn't really matter. These are your energy sources. So
Yeah.
these are also empty calories. So yes, if I was telling someone that wanted to track calories or talk about calories, like, yes, eat less of the energy calories,
Yeah.
right? Eat less of the fat and carbs. Eat less processed oils and processed carbs. And yes, absolutely. Don't eat less protein though. These are completely different ball games here, right? So
Yeah.
that's the problem is people go on the calorie restricted diet and they're like, hey, bro, a calorie a calorie. You just calorie deficit. All you want is calorie deficit. Like, okay, now you're just going to be eating less protein. You're going to get less nutrients. If you're just cutting your calories arbitrarily, you're going to be worse off and you're
Mm.
going to be losing muscle mass. Actually, they do the studies too, and you can see what type of weight you've lost. Because on a scale, you don't know if it's fat or muscle,
Right.
right? So if you're eating just less calories in general, you're eating less protein, less nutrients, you're going to have less optimal immune status, nutrient status, and you're going to lose muscle mass, right? So
Yeah.
that's the simplest way to explain it is like at least separate these protein calories from your energy calories.
That's good. Now, this was a specific question that was asked when I said we were going to be chatting, and it was, as long as your diet does not put your lipid profile into a dangerous position and keep your blood sugar levels high, um, can you keep your caloric intake at the correct levels? And does it matter then what you eat? So it kind of ties into
Mm.
what you were just talking there with the different balancing acts.
I kind of know what this person means. There's a whole other school of thought of like these Lane Norton guys that they're really into like kind of attacking my side. But now
Yeah,
actually I'm friends with this guy Lane and he's in my series. And
very
so
cool.
I told it like a lot of the benefit does just come from fat loss in general. And then
Hmm.
this is like, right? So it's like any way you can lose weight is probably good. And you're getting a lot of benefits from that. But you have to go deeper because you could be just losing weight and losing muscle and having like poor nutrient status. You could be getting sick. I've done all this. I don't get sick anymore. It's amazing. Right.
Yeah,
So there's more to it. There's more to it. But so this question was about lipid profile.
yeah,
Right. So if you are doing some sort of diet and it sounded like you're getting the right amount of calories and your lipids look good, then you probably are okay, but that still doesn't tell you about your muscle mass, your metabolic health. Well, some of the lipid profile will tell you about that,
yeah,
but your nutrient status. So yes, anything can work in the short term. I mean, there's a guy that ate a Twinkie diet. This professor he ate it was like a convenience store diet. He called it a Twinkie diet, but it's Twinkie, whatever you could get a gas station,
yeah,
and he lost weight because he was only eating like 1,800 calories a day, whatever
yeah,
it was. And
yeah,
so he was in this calorie deficit and he lost weight. Of course, right? I get it. And he's like, this is not healthy. I felt terrible. His
yeah.
blood lipids were probably a mess. All the cholesterol levels were probably way off. So you have to look beyond that, and then you also have to look what is a good lipid profile. All right,
Yeah.
I think mainstream doctors don't have the right idea about that.
Mm,
All right, it's like
yeah.
I'm looking at the triglyceride to HDL ratio, so that would I don't want to get into these details, but yeah, if you
Yeah.
have low triglycerides and a high HDL, like then you probably are on the right track.
Now, the kind of last thing, and we'll keep it on this topic, and that is, somebody listening today is saying, "Man, Brian, I've been making a lot of the wrong choices. I have some of the X, Y, and Z health issues you're talking about, or I'm pre whatever it is." Now, when making these changes, it sounds like for some people you've spoken with, they've been able to actually, I don't want to say reverse the path, but change the path of, what the health was going into, or where they were heading for. So talk a little bit about how the body does that, or what, somebody should be doing as like a first step in, this
Hmm.
next transition for them.
Yeah, we make a big case in the beginning of the film. What you eat matters most. Of all the levers you can pull, what you eat is going to drive the most changes. And
Mhm.
then within what you eat, the nutrient to energy ratio is going to drive the most. And actually, Lane Norton agreed with this. So
Yeah.
this is like the opposite side of my world, if you call it. And that he agrees as well. He's like, well, you need to get more nutrients or less energy.
Yeah.
And so the number one, and then how do you do that? Well, you have to get rid of the processed foods. It's like, why are processed foods bad? Someone could say, like Lane, he's like, hey, I eat Pop Tarts. His whole joke is Pop Tarts, right? Or he likes to eat ice cream. I like to eat ice cream because I have a good nutrient to energy ratio, and then ice cream can fit within that. I get that.
Right.
I totally get that, right? Because I'm active, I'm working out, I'm eating nutrient dense foods, right? I'm eating oysters, I'm eating like sauerkraut and pickles and meat and eggs, and it's great. And then but it's with my overall diet, it's good. It is a good nutrient to energy ratio. So
Yeah.
it's people just need to, but what doesn't work is if the processed foods immediately start completely throwing off your nutrient energy ratio and you're going to be screwed. So that's why processed foods are bad. Some people they'll
Right.
like be like, oh man, well like this like red dye. Well, red dye is probably not good anyway. They have studies showing that red dye is bad, but they'll get really obsessed over like little details. But why processed foods are bad is because it's a very little nutrients, little protein, whole bunch of empty calories, refined fats and carbs. You got to get rid of those. It's just not going to work. I mean, have them once a week if you have to have a little bit,
Yeah.
but that's it. It's just like start going down that path. People,
Yeah.
like I'm telling you, it's going to change your health. It's amazing what happens. My allergies went away. I went my whole life. You go to allergists, they're just like, oh, this is what you do. You can take this medication. This whole thing changed my diet, completely went away.
I love it. Well, Brian, I want to say thanks so much for one, sharing your journey, but two, all your knowledge and expertise. And I know there's a lot more that we could always jump into, but excited to watch your journey and excited to see all the things you learn. And we'll probably have to do this again here in 3 years as the knowledge grows and the
Oh
the
yeah.
next finding happens.
Awesome. Yeah. When the film comes out, hopefully before 3 years. Now, it'll hopefully be like 1 year. Yeah.
Yes, we will definitely be promoting that.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, Brian.